Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. You know, there's a meme from white liberals that you shouldn't call someone a Nazi unless they're actually a Nazi. Well, when you got people running around with swastikas who are throwing around all sorts of anti-black and anti-Semitic slogans and threats, I think it's safe to say that we can call these people Nazis. Because this is what was happening in Orlando, Florida, just this last weekend. Fun fact, did you know that the largest percentage of the January 6th insurrectionists came from the state of Florida? Now, as I've told you for the longest time, white supremacy is highly reliant on the use of proxies. You have something that's standing in as a placeholder or a substitute for something else. And when it comes to the language, they do the exact same thing. You don't say that we're going to be attacking black people or we're going to be criminalizing black people. Instead, you say we're criminalizing wokeness. And what's the definition of wokeness? Well, everything having to do with black people. And when you have dyed-in-the-wool career racists like Ron DeSantis, who make it a point that they're just going to be having a slew of legislation, all of it redundant, you got 5 laws saying the exact same thing, that's meant to send a message. And the white supremacists, the rank and file irregular forces of white supremacy, they understand exactly what the message is. The government's saying, hey guys, let's get on code. We're giving you the green light. We're egging you on. We're encouraging you. These laws are not just being passed as political gestures. They're being passed as a call to action. A call to do what action? Well, as we saw in Orlando, this is where it was supposed to be going. And both parties are involved, by the way. The Republicans may be the most vocal about it, but the Democrats have been giving not so silent approval. Because while the Republicans have been defining black history as being wokeness and it must be removed, the Democrats, such as the Cajun Skeletor, James Carville, and America's favorite sharecropper, Negro Jim Clyburn, they've also been attacking so-called wokeness. Their definition of wokeness is anything that punishes the police. So you have the Republicans and the Democratic parties both on the exact same page that wokeness needs to be gotten rid of. Republicans' definition of wokeness, anything having to do with black history or demands for justice based on the history of black people in this country. Democrats' definition of wokeness, anything having to do with black people deciding that maybe race soldiers shouldn't be allowed to murder them. The bipartisan message is crystal clear. Republicans are going to be leading the charge against black people, and Democrats will be justifying it, or at the very least, they'll be standing back not saying or doing anything about it. It was no coincidence that Jim Clyburn and James Carville decided they were going to do that, and that you had all of these white Democrats and black bootlicks for them who were on the cable TV circuit all pushing the line that this wokeness thing's a danger to Democrats. You're going to lose us elections. This after the very same people who they were criticizing for their wokeness put Joe Biden in the White House and handed the Democrats the Senate. So what this means is this has nothing to do with winning elections, and it has everything to do with maintaining white supremacy, maintaining the racist status quo in this country. What you see going on, especially in Florida, was just the most ultra manifestation of it. This could not have happened if you actually had an opposition political party that was dedicated to stopping stuff like this. But both parties work for the exact same white supremacist cause. Black people have made it clear that we're not going to be suffering in silence. We're going to actually stand up for ourselves. And as a result, you have the Republicans who have been leading the charge to attack black people, and Democrats making it very clear they're going to stand back while the Republicans, they hope, use laws and legislative maneuvers to bludgeon us into silence. Somebody talks about abortion. Then you got Democratic governors and Democratic attorney generals saying, oh, we're going to do retaliatory legislation if you try to limit abortion. And most of those Planned Parenthoods are in black neighborhoods. On the other hand, you start talking about immigration. Why, we need to do something. We need retaliatory legislation. We need to do something. We need to put some laws on the books. Black people are being killed. Black people's history is being erased, which is a precursor for coming after us. And what do the Democrats say? Oh, man, that wokeness thing, that's what we need to be focusing on. It's all this wokeness problem. Now, people were fine with all of this anti-black dog whistling, actually no dog whistling, all of this open anti-black advocating against our very existence. People were fine with it so long as it looked like all of these laws and the resulting racial anger and violence that it was supposed to promote were only going to be aimed at black people. As long as it was going to be erasing black people's history, which everyone recognized as a precursor to erasing us physically, as long as that was the case, well, neither the Democrats nor anyone else was going to do anything about it. And now people are seeing the inevitable spreading of that anti-black racism now being extended to other groups. Now all these laws that they thought were only going to be limited to black people, well, now some of these white supremacists are making it clear, hey, we got some other folks on that list too. Black folks ain't the only ones. They may be at the top of the list, but they're not the only ones on the list. And now that those racists are aiming their threats at other people, at non-black people, now all of a sudden it's a 5-alarm fire. Now all of a sudden the white media is looking to go, oh, this is getting serious. When did this start? This is getting serious. Oh my God. Oh yeah, now it's a problem. But understand something, this didn't just sprout out of the ground. This is a program at work. These Nazis didn't just come out of the woodwork because it was a Saturday they had nothing better to do. This has been planned and this has been organized and orchestrated for the longest time. This is what the Manhattan Institute's phony hysteria about critical race theory was meant to do. It was meant to put forward the ridiculous, asinine moral panic that there's some existential threat to white people. And what's the threat? To white people's feelings. And that white people need to band together and they need to go to these school boards and make threats of violence because this is about maintaining white primacy. If you hurt my feelings, I'm going to kill you because I have the right to. They could care less about the schools, by the way. Their kids are getting shot down in the schools. They don't care. Their kids are coming out of school, can't read, can't write. They don't care about that. And everybody understood that. They understood that the schools was merely nothing more than a propaganda PR maneuver. It was simply meant as some way that they could try to justify the larger offensive that was the real goal itself. If you're going to be preparing some sort of reprehensible, immoral attack, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to put out the propaganda heavy. And you got to try to make it something that hopefully is justifiable. Why? Think of the kids. The kids, you see, the kids. This is not about us attempting some racist maneuver against black people. This is not about some anti-black offensive. This is about just making sure the white kids don't feel as if they're being put upon, like they're being targeted. That's what it is. We're trying to protect the kids. Who would have a problem with protecting children? Well, apparently the NRA does. Now, when you have these white supremacist operatives like Christopher Rufo hoping to gin up crisis actors to go do their pathetic political theater at these school boards, it was all being done to send a message that white people need to get mad and violent about anything discussing black people's history, black people's rights. You're talking about race, you need to get mad about it. You need to get violent about it. You need to get in people's faces about it and tell them what you're going to do. So you start by getting rid of books. And then you get rid of the people who the books are talking about. It's a script that the white supremacists know very well. They've been running it in Africa, the Americas, and Europe for 1,000 years. The anti-black hate-mongering and race-baiting that Ron DeSantis and the racist Republicans have been doing has resulted in a full-on Nazi rally in Florida. And this wasn't some weird, unintended side effect. This was the entire point. This was the reason why the Republicans have been passing law after law, completely and thoroughly redundant, all of them about the exact same thing. That's the reason why they were doing it. They were doing it over and over again to see how long it would take the inbred rubes to finally get the message. White media sitting here talking like a bunch of idiots. How come DeSantis isn't condemning that Nazi rally? It's because he and his cohorts have been passing laws that were nothing more than thinly veiled anti-black hate speech throughout their state. It's the government encouraging these white supremacists to go after people. Look at the laws in Texas and Florida. All of the laws that they've passed recently are deputizing laws. It's not about the government doing anything. These are laws that are giving citizens the incentive to go after other people. Not based on anything that they've done, but based on just the fact that they exist. Just the fact that something exists, we're going to give you a law that makes it where you can sue about it. And of course, the whole point, as we all know, is this is not about getting money. Everyone understands that these are all steps on a road that is supposed to lead to some act of mass racial violence against black people. That's what all this is meant to lead to. Now, of course, what some of these other groups didn't understand was that they were on the list too. You see, ever since 9/11, a number of groups have been finding out that their would-be honorary oppressor status card has been revoked by the dominant society. People who themselves identified, and in many cases still do identify as, say, Caucasian, At least that's what they list themselves as, but in recent years what they found out is that the rest of the society, the actual oppressor class, not the honorary members of it, they no longer feel like playing along with this charade. Oh, they humored them for a little while, but now the game's over. A large number of people who thought that they were de facto this or honorary that, they're finding out that they were just kidding themselves. And now a number of them are sad, a number of them are angry, all of them are scared. But my question is, how much sympathy am I expected to have? Am I supposed to feel sorry for someone because their plan to be an honorary member of the oppressor class didn't work out? Because that's all that happened here. There was no great betrayal that occurred. The people who we see shocked and scared at what's going on in Florida, they walked right into this one with their eyes wide open. In fact, a number of them actually helped to bring this about. When someone engages in the same anti-black racism as the white supremacists, but they then go a step beyond that and they invoke their own history as an underhanded way of attempting to invalidate black people's experience, that's someone who has chosen to become a tool of white supremacy. No one forced them to do it, they chose it. Now, when white supremacy inevitably breaks that tool, am I supposed to cry for them? When someone is finally disillusioned of a pathetic fantasy that they were trying to indulge themselves in, am I supposed to be sad and say, hey, the scales have fallen from your eyes. You finally can no longer deny the reality, at least for a few minutes. Am I supposed to be sad that someone finally sees the truth? Many of the people who today are decrying the Nazis who were rallying in Florida over the weekend were also the same people who have been cheering folks like Ron, the racist DeSantis on, people who have been wagging their finger at black folks telling us that they were tired of always hearing about slavery and there's no discrimination anymore, and black people are just making excuses for their own personal failings, and if black people as a group are doing poorly, well, that's because you have a failed culture. There's no such thing as systemic racism. Those folks who have been playing that game, what they're finding out is the game played them. There are people in this society who seem to think that if they put all the attention on us, if they focus society's anger at black people, then apparently somehow that means that these rabid racists are never going to come at them. They'll just be so busy beating up black people that attention will never go to anyone else, and that doesn't work. Once a bunch of degenerates have been able to indulge their violence and hatred with absolutely no restraint and absolutely no pushback, that's going to become habit forming. It's not as if when they get through with black people, they're going to simmer down. After they're through with black people, they're going to look around and say, now who's next? We want more. A number of people, I guess they figured that given enough time, the dominant society would forget that they're not part of that group. Or better yet, given enough time, the dominant society would grandfather clause them in. Now, in the United States, the Irish and the Dutch and such, they were eventually grandfather claused in, but that's pretty much where it stopped. And yet there are still folks who at this late date are hoping that maybe, just maybe, there's going to be an exception made for them. Not going to happen. So the people who had been remaining silent while all of this hysteria, this phony outrage about critical race theory was being promoted, who saw what the scam was from the beginning and didn't say anything, or worse, who chimed in with it because, as far as they were concerned, black people need to be made to pipe down. Well, these people all of a sudden are trying to walk away from their words and walk away from their actions. The people who allowed this lie to take root in the first place and didn't challenge it, if they're going to preserve themselves, they're going to have to do it now. They're going to have to start actually pushing back against the Christopher Rufos and the Manhattan Institutes and the rest of these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools. But we need to make sure that people do not forget that both the Republicans and the Democrats went along with this whole woke as a euphemism code word for black con game. Both parties were doing this. The Christopher Rufos and the Ron DeSantises and the Greg Abbotts, these racist scumbags could never have gotten as far as they have without the Democrats helping them and signal boosting their lies. But, as always happens with these guys, they eventually wind up forming a circular firing squad because there is no honor among thieves. Don't be surprised when a number of the same people who have been calling themselves railing against so-called wokeness, man, a lot of them are going to be either falling silent with that line of guff, or don't be surprised when a number of them start trying to say that wokeness isn't so bad after all. Because when you've chosen to play the fool, there may be a few moments when you get to heap some praise on yourself and pretend like you were so clever for your mendacity. You get to have a couple of perverted giggles because you're harming black people, or you know what you're doing is meant to erase black people's history, and to you, like, we're setting up the genocide and we have power now because these niggers can't do anything about it. But no matter how many black history books you ban, no matter how many historical lesson plans that you outlaw, reality always gets the last word. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: George Montgomery, Steve Mugisa, Sandra Bates, Justin, and Larry Beard. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.